Good morning, everybody. Good morning. How you doing? Happy New Year again? Yeah, I can tell you guys are a little sluggish this morning. Like maybe you've already given up on your New Year's resolution of getting a full 8 hours of sleep and eating right. How many of you are still exercising? Come on, anybody? Liars. Okay, some of you are. All right, that's cool. Yeah, my New Year's resolution was to just not embarrass myself this year. And so I picked up these pair of pants this week at JCPenney. I'm hoping they don't go out of business. They're the only business that carries my size. I mean, my brand. No, my size. And I am notorious for having tags. Are you guys like that? You walk out and you got a tag hanging here and you didn't know it was there. And of course, I'm a 4236. For any of you that are out shopping and you see something that's a 4236, buy it for me. But anyway, so I'm notorious for walking out, and I think my last pair of pants I bought, I was at Caribou Coffee that morning on a Sunday morning, and the lady said, "Sir, you've got a tag. It goes all the way up and down your leg." And so I'm just wanting to make sure that I didn't have any. First service didn't find any, but I'm just trying not to embarrass myself because I do that a lot. Now we're talking about resolutions, and this series has been kind of fun because this is the season of self-improvement, right? I mean, this is the time of year where, the gyms are full, the YMCA is full, the beauty places are full, the health shake places are full, and, it's all about how do I make me better? How do I get slimmer? How do I get stronger? How do we get more out of debt? All of that stuff. And so, but what we said last week was instead of asking, what can I do to improve me? Maybe the better question would be, what breaks my heart? What breaks my heart to the place where I want to get out of my comfort zone and go make a difference in some organization's life, some person's life, and because it's so easy, you guys, you know this. It's so easy just to show up on Sunday mornings at church or maybe a Bible study or a grow group and think, well, that's the essence of Christianity. And it's not. It's not. And so, we kind of get in our own little bubble. And so, again, we've been asking, what breaks your heart this new year? And what are you doing about it? And then I started thinking about this. And something hit me. I bet a lot of you, you're like me. When you start thinking of, okay, now, Mark's asking me to do another thing, and all of a sudden this stuff starts coming up in you of maybe some anxiety or some frustration because you've already got a lot going on. And so instead of thinking, how can I get out there and help people, you're more along the lines of, and I'm more along the lines of, well, how do I preserve what I already have? And so we do this. We become life preservers. Man, they're making these things too small. Hang on a second here. I don't even know if this is going to work. Yeah, nope. And so we become life preservers. It's not about how can we help people. And why do we wear these things? We wear them so the riptide doesn't take us under. We wear these because when you're swimming with your older brother and he bonks you in the head with maybe his knee or a paddle or a brick, that you don't go under. I mean, it's to preserve life. That's why we wear these things. It's so we don't drown. It's so that we can take care of who we are. And that's the way we are wired in life too. We've got we've got our insurance, and we've got our security systems, and we got our seat belts and airbags, and we have everything possible to preserve life, to preserve my family's life, and to preserve the time, my time, and to save my money and all of that. We always think about us, and it's just hard to break out of that. And by nature, I am a life preserver. But the problem with being a life preserver is when you hold it up to the mandate of Christ, it doesn't wash. It just doesn't wash. I finished this painting this week. This is a painting of someone who wasn't about preserving life. Right? If you preserve life, you run from the authorities because they're coming after you. Right? Amen? But we're so into life. Now, here's the thing. Jesus doesn't call us to be life preservers. He calls us to be, don't worry, I won't throw it. He calls us to be lifesavers. We're supposed to be on the dock throwing the lifesaver out to those that are far from God, out to those that need help, out to those that are discouraged and broken. And I like that the candy is called a lifesaver as well. I think the guy that came up with the lifesaver, I think he made a mint. Well, come on, that was for Rachel. She loves dad jokes. Did she make it in here this service either? Where are you? Yeah, she loves dad jokes. Seriously, Thrive, the problem with whatever it is that breaks my heart is at some point I have to begin going from being a preserver to becoming a saver. Not savior, saver. But that's hard because when I do that, it starts to feel as though I'm losing my life and the things that define my life, like my money, my time, my energy, my hobbies, my travel, my forward progress, my rank, my business, all of that stuff. And so then there's this tension. And Thrive, just so you know, when you discover that thing that breaks your heart, whether it's a group of people or an organization or starving kids in our city or starving kids, in a third world country or Haiti or whatever it is, trafficking, whatever it is, when you find that one thing, I'm going to tell you this right now, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you to get involved. And it's going to feel like you're giving away your stuff. You're giving up your time. You're giving away part of your life. And there's that real tension, that dichotomy of, I want to help, but I really don't want to help. And as we wrestle with the tension, then Jesus comes along and he says something profound. Now, this isn't a quote from Jesus, but this is basically the essence of what Jesus had to say about this. And he says, whoever devotes themselves to themselves will have nothing but themselves to show for themselves. That just hurt. Ouch. Let me say it again. Whoever devotes themselves to themselves will have nothing but themselves to show for themselves. And it's true that if life is all about you, if life is all about me, then we've missed the point. So we're going to look at a passage today, and we're going to study it just for a minute, but I want you to commit maybe to doing something. I would invite you to read both Matthew and Mark. Those are Gospels found in the New Testament. If you don't have a Bible, you can always download the Thrive app. We have a Bible connected in there. You can just kind of use that. Some other cool things too. But I would encourage you to read Matthew and Mark and look at how many times you see the word crowd. Circle it, right? Circle it with like a crayon or a pen or a highlighter or your eyeliner, whatever you want to use, okay? And because you're going to find out that Jesus was always surrounded by people. Now, I'm an extrovert. I like being around most people. But he was around people all the time. It was amazing. Anytime you open up the Bible and you start reading those two books specifically, you find out that he was constantly surrounded by crowds. And again, I've said this before, but we can't see the crowds that he was around, because I'm guessing that if we're a crowd, this isn't the kind of crowd he was around. He was probably around people that were a little bit more dirty, broken. And, as Jesus was around these crowds, I'm sure that sometimes the 12 disciples acted more like Secret Service. Like, Jesus on the move, Jesus on the move. I don't know why they do that. They didn't have electricity. But, Can't you just picture that? These guys are kind of like his bodyguards, his posse. And, Jesus is working through these terribly broken people in the crowd. And our people, when you get a president or a prime minister and that kind of thing happens, what happens? Well, the limo comes in and, people jump out and you can tell they have something, under their arm, and they're not about to go like this. I mean, they've got something, and you can just tell. And then they whisk them away and they're gone. But Jesus, his disciples are walking with him, and they're like, come on, Jesus, man, you're walking the same pace as the crowd. What's up with that, Jesus? Why are you walking the same pace as the crowd? Because Jesus was surrounded by smelly people and broken people and sick people and people with blood issues. And what did they want Jesus to do? Did they just want him to pray over him? Hey, would you pray for us? No, it seemed like everybody wanted Jesus to touch them, or they wanted to touch him. Everybody wanted to touch him. Touch him, touch him, touch him. Now, just picture this. This is, kind of like out of a zombie movie. And I know that some of you are probably into zombie movies. And, you can just picture The Walking Dead and reaching out and trying to reach, and these people are sick and they're like, where's Carl? That kind of thing that was from The Walking Dead. And now I know who watches The Walking Dead. Where's Carl? Right? And everybody's wanting to touch him, and they're smelly and they're sick and wanting to touch him, and everywhere he goes. And this is the life of Jesus. Everywhere he went, he was surrounded by the crowds. So he had like these 12 guys, and they're trying to keep people at bay. And so here's what's happening in Luke chapter 14, verses 25 to 27. And we find one of these incidents where the large crowd is following Jesus. And it's funny because Luke says he turns to them. He's talking about Jesus, that Jesus turned to them. But I really think that Jesus turned on the crowd. You're like, really? Yeah, I'm for real. Let's jump in. It says large crowds, like hundreds of people, I'm sure hundreds of people. Large crowds were traveling with Jesus. In other words, they didn't just show up to watch him speak, and then when he was finished, they'd kind of get up and go home. All right, I'll see you. See you guys tomorrow. No, it wasn't like that. When these crowds were following Jesus, it was like they followed him everywhere. Why do you think sometimes he had to jump in a boat to cross the sea, cross the lake? He had to have an escape route sometimes because people were just piling in on him. And so here again, they're following him. And, it's kind of weird. It'd kind of be like when I leave here and I'm walking out to my truck and there's a crowd of people around my truck. Mark, that was a bad sermon. I know. And then they'd say something like, let's follow him to Perkins. Okay, and everybody shows up at Perkins. Now there's a huge line at Perkins, right? And then Lisa, of course, she loves Walmart. Next thing you know, there's 50 of us walking into Walmart. And then I go home and we live out in the country. Next thing you know, there's people camping out in our front yard. That's what Jesus was dealing with. It wasn't like they just came and saw him preach and next thing you know, they go home. It was like they were there. It says, large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to him, he said, and he turns to him and he's like, guys, listen, you're following me all the time. That's cool, but listen. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father, mother, wife, and children, brothers and sisters, then we have a problem, basically, is what he's saying. Now, what he's talking about, he's not talking about emotion. Like he's not saying, boy, your parents, I hate your parents. You should hate them too. I loathe your parents. Man, you should ditch your... That's not what he's saying. He's not talking about the emotion. He's talking about the willingness to allow Jesus to be the superior or the ultimate decision maker in one's life instead of like maybe one's family. And this is kind of like hyperbole. And this becomes clear as the verse goes on. So let me just kind of finish reading. He says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate father, mother, wife, children, brothers, and sisters. In other words, if you're willing to make someone else the authority, if anyone comes to me and isn't willing to hate them, yes, he says, let me just be honest. Yes, even willing to hate their own life. Again, not emotion. It's not like when some, 14-year-old girl says, I hate my life, and she's all snotty, and I just hate my life. You know how that stuff goes. At least I know how that goes. It's not out of control. He's talking about who's going to be in control. Who's going to be in charge? Who's going to call the shots? Because such a person who doesn't decide once and for all that Jesus is Lord and in charge, such a person cannot be my disciple. And of course they couldn't. We know that. Because to be someone's disciple, you had to declare your allegiance to them. You had to tell them that you are my leader. Becoming someone's disciple, say, I'm going to follow you no matter what. And this was Jesus' big, bold way of saying, look, I know you're following me around. I know you're traveling wherever I travel, but you can't actually be my follower, a sincere disciple, until you decide once and for all who is going to be Lord. And let me just say this, Tribe. There is a big difference between Jesus being your Savior and Jesus being your Lord. Well, what's the difference, Mark? The difference is maybe you've had a crisis commitment sometime in your life. Like for me, it was around the dinner table at 19 years old, with my Aunt Carol praying, and I had that moment in time when I gave my life to God. I gave my heart to God, and I just said, God, I'm such a screw up, and just take me and save me. Save me from... That's when Jesus is your Savior. But when He's your Lord is when you say, okay, God, where's my wallet? Where are my car keys? Where's my future? Where's everything about me? Because now I'm handing that over to you. You following me? That's Lord. You have Savior, Lord, save my soul. And then you have Lord, God, you got it all. You've got it all. The Bible calls that sanctification. That's a churchy term, but that's what it's called. And so, he's talking about who's going to call the shots. And to hate your own life isn't to feel bad about yourself. To hate your own life is to decide once and for all that you are not going to be on the throne of your life. Consider yourself sitting on a throne. No, not that throne. Another throne. And you're sitting on the throne and you're in charge. But you get up off the throne of your life and you invite Christ to sit on that throne. And, in this moment of self-improvement, of New Year's resolutions, and again, I'm not bashing anybody who's, trying to fix himself, trying to lose 5 or 50 pounds or whatever. I get that. I'm in the boat. I hope I'm not sinking the boat. But suddenly we find this tension that Jesus creates around making me a better person versus following Jesus. Deciding how I spend more time on Mark so that Mark can be thinner and smarter and out of debt. There's tension between that and me following Jesus, doing what Jesus would have me do. And let me just say this, the essence of following Jesus is self-denial, not self-improvement. Let me read that one again. The essence of following Jesus is self-denial, not self-improvement. And then he lays it on thick, and this is kind of like the thing he would say to kind of thin out the crowd. And then he says, whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Okay, so you can still be my traveling buddy. We can still go to lunch together. We can eat, we can do stuff. I can heal your mama and her mama. But don't kid yourself. You are not my disciple until you decide to come and die to you. And at that point, the What's in it for me group, they just kind of left and joined like yoga or something. They're looking for a different group. Okay, yoga. Scrapbookers, no. No, that's a support group. And to the folks following Jesus, those ones that are around him all the time, anytime you bring up the cross, it just scares them spitless. Because like this, Jesus is on his way to the cross, and people in that century had seen things like this because it wasn't uncommon. You kind of mess with the Roman people, you mess with the Roman guard, and next thing you know, you're hanging on a tree, and they'd put you on one side, others on the other side of this road, and people would come into Jerusalem, and you would see all of these crucified people, and it would scare you spitless. And yet Jesus is telling people that they need to let their lives die and that they need to pick up a cross. If you want to be my disciple, not just my traveling buddy, not just show up when I'm around, not just the person that's going to provide a meal once in a while. No, because all of that is self-improvement. I just want to be around my buddy. It's all about self-denial. It's not so much about becoming a better version of you. It's about becoming a better person because you focus on something else. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Jesus said something. These poor people. Can you just picture running around with him for 3 years? He did public ministry. Imagine running around with him and finally, maybe at some point down the road, he says, but whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will save it. And the people are, Jesus is saying, listen, man, you can be the supreme authority over your family and your business and your money and your portfolio and your job and your kids and the whole thing. Or, as long as it's about you, by the way, as long as it's about you, it really can't be about me. And so there's the tension. And if you decide to wrestle with the question, what breaks your heart, you will Thrive, you will ultimately be led away from you. And if you wrestle with the question, what would happen if I gave my life away? What would happen if I gave my life to serving people? To doing the hard thing instead of always seeking the simple, more easy way? See, it's not about self-improvement, it's about self-denial. Our culture's funny. We drive down Belmont just to look at the big houses. You know what I mean? And nothing against people who live on Belmont. Good for them. But for whatever reason, because I like some of those, and I like Reeves as well. They got some of those old houses. Yeah. And nothing against those people. Some of you probably own those houses. But I think about people that have invested all of their time and energy into not just a nice house, but a nice car and a nice this and a nice that. And there's nothing wrong with nice, but I'm telling you, as long as you live for yourself, you're going to live for yourself. And as long as you're left to yourself, you're going to live for yourself. And as long as no one ever tells you what Jesus said about this, the default, I'm the same way. I will live for myself. And you know what? At the end of 40s or 50s or 60s, and you have this like kind of wrinkle-free life other than maybe your face, and you've got everything insured and everything's buttoned up and everything's shiny and everyone looks at you and they envy you because they know that what you've got is, you've made that. And at the end of the day, at some point, and I don't know when it is, but as a pastor of 28 years now, I have seen people over and over and over again say, was it all worth it? Was the investment that I made in all of this worth it? Because here's what I know about you, and I know it about me. You are not enough for you to live for. It's kind of like when I take my kids golfing when they're, in their young teens. Isaac and Micah, boy, those guys liked playing golf. But they thought they were pros at 13 or 14. I don't see Micah, but I see Isaac in the back looking at me. And those guys, they would swing, and I just want to be with my sons. You know what I'm talking about? I just want to be with my boys. And we're out there, and they're starting to get really upset. Slamming clubs, breaking clubs, throwing balls, all this. And at some point, I looked at them and I said, guys, you are not good enough to get mad. We want our game to be so good that people will envy us. We want our houses to be so put together that people will, wow. We want our yards to be so perfect that people drive by and go, oh, I'm such a loser. And I'm just saying there's more potential in you than, hey, you've never looked so good, or you've never been closer to your ideal weight, and you can fit into some of those jeans that you wore in college. Who cares? Yeah, that's great. All that stuff is great. And it's funny people want people to envy them. Do you remember back in the 80s and 90s? How many of you grew up in the 80s? How many of you grew up in the 90s? How many of you grew up in the 70s and you can still raise your hand? Okay, yeah. So I wrote this. I don't know if it's completely accurate, but I think it is. So like back in the 80s and 90s, and I'm talking about, have you ever been envied by someone? Maybe you were in high school and you bought the coolest basketball shoes. Look at these. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You had those shoes. And you had them. It was like, I got the shoes. You had the shoes. You didn't even play basketball and you had the shoes. You were a girl and had the shoes. Late 80s, maybe the 90s. Didn't even matter. You had the shoes. And remember how you kept those shoes clean? Oh, man. And if someone stepped on your shoe, it was like they just crashed into your car. And do you remember back in the day, what it was like when people would comment about those shoes? Now, I'm not sure I got the lingo right, but I'm trying, okay? And they'd be like, dude, those shoes are so rad. And you'd be like, yeah, chowabunga. I think that's 80s or 90s. I don't know. Or, man, those shoes, they're all that in a bag of chips. To which you would say, bro, quit with the bromance. And then they'd say, homie, those shoes are so fat. And fat with a PH. I never understood it. Those shoes are so fat. Can I try them on, bro? To which you would say, what a dweeb. Talk to the hand because the face don't understand. How many of you said any of that stuff? Liars. Yeah, back in the day when stuff made us feel really important and we talked like complete idiots. Hey, let me ask you guys something. And I'm serious about this. I want you to think really hard about it. Where are those shoes right now? Where are those shoes right now? Where are they? Of what value are they to you right now? And if you could possibly find them, and if you actually wore them outside, do you think people would stop you and say, sir, where did you get those shoes? Do you think they would do that, Thrive? They'd be like, oh, someone needs to get that poor guy a pair of shoes. Those are old. Here's what I've discovered. No matter how unsuccessful you are, no matter how successful you are, No matter what you own or what you don't own, no matter where you end up, at some point in your life, and in your experience, along the way, and everybody asks this question, and I've seen people ask this question for years and years and years as they get older and older and older. They ask it in different ways and use different phrases and words, but basically what they say, and the question is, wow, does any of this even matter? Does any of this really count? Is any of this going anywhere? Does it even matter? Does it even matter? Does the house, does the car, does the business, does the savings account, does the sports, do the hobbies, do our travel, does any of that in the long run really make a difference? Because you can have everything to live with and nothing to live for. I've learned that, and it's a struggle for me, that the more I try to live for others, the more full I feel. Which brings us back to the pesky question from last week. What breaks your heart? What breaks your heart, Thrive? What's that one thing that grips you more than any other issue? And I know we're not going to change the world, but maybe you can change somebody's world. What is that one thing? What is that one little thing, that little slice of the world that you can make a difference in? And here's another question to help you narrow it. Who's doing something about that issue already? Because like Henry Blackaby says, hey, find out where God is moving and join him in it there. Here's the big takeaway for today. You should write this down. When you decide to carry someone else's burden, you have entered into the activity of God. Thrive. When you decide to carry someone else's burden, you have entered into the activity of God. I'm going to invite my really good friend. I love this lady. You're going to love her too. Jill Chandler from the Grand Forks Women's Pregnancy Center is coming. And we're missing we're missing a microphone. Jill, you got your own microphone. Jill has a microphone and will travel. All right. Jill is the executive director of the Women's Pregnancy Center, and I invited her this week. I just shot her some questions and said, would you tell us some stories about people that have done selfless acts, kind of gotten out of their comfort zone, to do that which is not standard or typical or even expected. Would you welcome Jill Chandler?
Thanks so much.
Hey, Jill.
Thanks so much for...
And you got your hubby here.
Yeah, I do.
Ryan, welcome. Welcome to Thrive. Thanks for coming. We can clap for him too.
Yes, please do. He does not have an easy life.
Hey, so tell us about your organization, Thrive. We're going to be out of here in about 7 minutes. Tell us about your organization. When you talk about what gets in somebody's heart, the Women's Pregnancy Center, I think there's a chair for you.
I know, I think better standing.
Okay.
I found that out the first service.
Really?
Yeah. I'm going to kick this aside.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm going to still sit.
So, the Women's Pregnancy Center has been around for 31 years, and it was born out of a broken heart that two women had for women who did not have enough support in an unplanned pregnancy. So they poured themselves out and started it, and it's still going strong.
This one is what grips my wife's heart. She loves the ministry you guys provide. And basically, so a person or a couple come to you, and what happens?
Well, for one thing, God calls the shots. We're a faith-based nonprofit. And so whoever He brings to us, we meet with love. There's no judgment, no condemnation, no, if you'd only done it this way. We just love them and support them. Yeah. And last year, our clients were aged 14 to 40.
And how many did you see?
this is the really big news, because I just did the stats, and we had this number of client visits last year, 1,775.
Woo! Wow. How many?
1,775.
And so realistically, Jill, how many of the young people or people, they may not be that young, come and you say they're on their way to having an abortion in Fargo, and by God's grace, you were able to help them reel it back, pull it back? Do you have any idea?
We know for sure that there have been 61 minds changed, for sure. Those are the ones we know solidly. So in the United States, there's 6 million pregnancies, and of that 6 million, half of them are unplanned. That's why we're here.
Right. And this is not our attempt to make anybody who has had an abortion feel bad.
No. We're very...
We love you guys.
And, you know, I mean, there's 3 choices: parenting, adoption, and legal abortion.
So give us a story, though. I mean, give us a story that Joe Plummer might appreciate about Women's Pregnancy Center and making a difference. And do you have that?
Oh, I have tons of client stories. But to tie into your sermon, which was a great message, by the way, took notes like crazy the first service, and this time I just kind of let it soak. It was great. So, what was your question? Maybe I should sit down.
I took so many notes except the big question. No. Give us a story. Give us a story of somebody or something somehow that has made a difference and you weren't even expecting it. And all of a sudden God showed up in this, and the next thing you know,
So we rely on volunteers. We really do. We rely on people who are passionate and whose heart is broken for people in this situation. And last summer, I got a message from a gal who said, hey, if my husband and I are empty nesters, if anybody ever has a need, let me know. And you know, that's a rarity that we would have someone who would need housing. So I thought, oh, that's good to know, and I kept her name in a file. And then we had a client this, I guess it was late October, and she did not know what she was going to do. She had started her pregnancy in a terrible situation, and she'd had the baby. She's been coming to our classes, so we've gotten to know her well, and she had to be moving out of her apartment. She had no family, nowhere to go, and I thought, So I sent a 1-line text message to this gal, and I said, we have a need. This was months later. And the next day, she was in my office, and we visited, and she met the client, and they made a plan that they would, that she would move in with her in December. But that woman's, the volunteer's father became very, very sick and ended up in hospice. And so it wasn't a time when she could take someone into her home because she wasn't really going to be there. And so one of our mentoring volunteers who works in the Earn While You Learn program said, I'll take her. I'll take her home. She can come home with me. Just like that, in the busiest month of the year. And she stepped forward and made a way for her to have a home for her and her baby.
That's cool. It's small stuff. It's in the small stuff.
It's small stuff.
It is. You know, Jill, we are either... we are either able to bend over or not. We are either life preservers or life savers.
I'll pick this one.
I hope you guys do too. Thank you, Jill.